Hello there, ladies and gentlemen! Age of Empires 4 came out recently, if you weren't aware of it, and if you were not, then I hope you're nice and cozy underneath that rock. But luckily, I'm here to tell you all about it, and it's the first big competitive real-time strategy game to come out in a while. A ton of Starcraft folks and other folks are hyped about it, and since it's similar in a lot of ways, and it's bringing some fresh enthusiasm to real-time strategy games, I've been really into it lately, and I'm planning on making some more content for it. So I thought I'd just make a little video to give you my initial impressions, especially comparing it to Starcraft, and also just to give an overview for people that haven't seen it yet, and just kind of give some hot takes, some thoughts that I have on the scene after having spent many years studying RTS games and seeing how Brood War and Starcraft 2 have done over the years. So yeah, it's gonna be a little bit of a rant here, but hope you'll enjoy it, and hopefully it'll give you a little bit more info about where I'm coming from here. As you probably noticed, I already have been doing some casting for Age of Empires 4, but I'm planning on doing some guides and other stuff as well. I know some of you are just here for the Starcraft, and I'm hoping that you'll not riot too much now that there's going to be other stuff mixed in. I know I've been saying for a while that I was planning on doing other games, and now I actually am. I'm not going to stop doing Brood War. I'm just going to be doing also Age of Empires stuff, and again, probably some other games as well. I thought about like starting another channel or something, but it just wouldn't make too much sense in the grand scheme of things. So hopefully it's not too big a burden to just skip the videos that you aren't interested in if you're not interested in non-StarCraft, and please don't just give them a thumbs down just because they're not StarCraft. But I'm really enjoying Age of Empires, and I hope you will too. And hopefully, like I said, this video will give you some more context, but I'm open to ideas and feedback, so let me know if there's something specific that you would like to see. Okay, so a real quick overview of Age of Empires 4, if you haven't seen it yet. If you have, you can skip forward a little bit. It starts off similar to StarCraft and other RTS games. You've got a few workers, you get resources near your base, but unlike other games, there are actually 4 resources in this game, and they're used for different types of buildings and units. So you focus your villagers on gathering whatever goes with the strategy or build that you've picked. There are currently 8 civilizations, and each one has most of the same buildings and basic units, but they all have special bonuses and unique buildings and unique units. So they're very similar, but they're differentiated in significant ways. You spend a chunk of resources to build special buildings that advance the age of your civilization, and that's how you tech up to higher tech. So another interesting thing about AOE is that there are a few ways to win. You can kill your opponent's main buildings, and you don't have to kill all of their buildings, just the main ones, which are called landmarks. Or you can use a special religious unit to take control of the sacred sites and hold those for 10 minutes. It's an objective win. Or you can build a wonder, which takes a bajillion resources, and you hold that for 15 minutes, and you can win with that as well. And I really like the objective win conditions. It makes it interesting because you can sometimes change the way the game is going to be played by countering their strategy by making the game about a different goal than they were. Like you can't turtle too hard, for example, because then they'll just take the sacred sites, and then you can force someone to move out. So there's kind of a rock, paper, scissors to the units. Spearmen do extra damage to horsemen. Archers are able to kite spearmen and often do extra damage to spearmen. And then horsemen are able to chase down squishy archers. So it's a rock, paper, scissors thing. And at first I thought this was really boring, but then I realized that it's much more complicated than that. There's other units at higher tech levels, or some that are unique to civilizations that mess with that rock, paper, scissors balance. And there's also kind of a vertical rock, paper, scissors too, because sometimes you can get higher tier units, and those will counter the lower tier units. So if at age 3 you can get siege units, and siege units are very good against lower tier units. There's area of effect units. There's high damage units that can pierce armor, for example. And then at age 4, you get even better units that are even more powerful, but sometimes the low tier units en masse can actually then counter those highest tier units. So it's kind of interesting how there's always a counter in some way, and it's not necessarily too straightforward. Anyway, if you want me to make a video explaining the way the units in the combat work and the different counters and stuff, I'm happy to do that. But there are some videos like that already on the internet, of course. The interface is similar to StarCraft 2 in most ways. There's some obnoxious things that seem natural in StarCraft that are really lacking in Age of Empires. Like there's a lot of stuff that you're just like, why did they not do this really obvious thing that StarCraft 2 did 10 years ago, or even StarCraft 1 did 20 years ago? For example, if you select 10 units, you can't just shift click out one of the units to have 9 selected. You actually have to like go to where they are on the map and shift click them out manually on the map instead of using a portrait or anything like that. But you could, just like StarCraft 2, you can queue up different buildings, multiple building selection, etc. But yeah, there's some other little ticks and problems with the interface and what have you, but hopefully those will get resolved. The game is brand new, and so hopefully they'll be able to improve some of those things. For example, they already have plans to patch in the patrol function. There's no patrol function in this game right now, but there will be soon. So anyway, another thing I really wanted to talk about is the campaigns. This is something that probably most people don't care about, but for me, it's actually the number one reason why I would recommend the game to people no matter what, and it's the campaigns. The campaigns are amazing. Now, this is coming from a former history teacher, from a history nerd, but I love the campaigns. It's basically like playing through a history documentary, and they have really cool little scenes where they like show the ruins of famous battles like in modern day, and then they'll actually like overlay the game graphics on top of it, so you can kind of like see that interface, and then you actually play the mission when the missions are all these famous battles that were important in history, and you're actually playing on a map that's made to be like the terrain of the actual terrain where it happens. So it's really, really cool. And then in between you get these little history like documents and like mini documentaries on things like how trebuchets are made or hunting with falcons or something like that. So yeah, the campaigns are just amazing. I really highly recommend them. They do not teach you how to play the multiplayer at all though. The campaigns don't really, they give you some of the basic mechanics, but some of the units are actually different prices and different stats in the campaign than they are in the multiplayer. And it doesn't really make you tech up a lot or start from the beginning with a low amount of resources and that kind of thing. So it's not super good for training you on playing the multiplayer, but there is this thing called, if you're like brand new at RTSs, there's a thing called, don't remember what it's called. I'll put the name on the screen right now, I guess. And it's like this section where you can do little training things, and it tells you the basics of mechanics and what have you, so it's pretty cool. So let me just rant a little bit here about some of the interesting things I've noticed about the growth of the game and some potentially hot takes on my perspective on. So one of the really funny, interesting things to see right now is that some of the Age of Empires 2 community are losing their minds. AOE4 is so much worse. It's terrible. They're taking away the skill. You can't do this. You can't do that. It's oversimplified, blah, 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 etc. And the funny thing about this is that is exactly what happened when Starcraft 2 came out. Some of the things that people are saying in like AOE4 like Twitch channels are the exact same word for word things that people from Brood War said about StarCraft 2 when it came out, that StarCraft 2 was dumbing it down, the skill ceiling would be lower, the multiple building selection is taking away the skill to get, like all this stuff is exactly what we're hearing now. And it's, I don't know, I just think it's interesting because I think StarCraft 2 turned out fine, and yes, I know a lot of people are going to disagree with that. They think it never lived up to expectations, but it wasn't bad. Like, objectively speaking, StarCraft 2 is not a bad game. It may not be as good as Brood War to some people, including myself, but it's also not bad, right? And so the Age of Empires 2 community are coming in and looking at Age of Empires 4 and wanting it to be exactly like Age of Empires 2, which is impossible. And that's the exact same impossible expectations that Brood War folks put on StarCraft 2 when it came out. They want it to be exactly the same as Brood War and just be better somehow than this thing that they've played for many years, and it just can't be that way. So I don't know, it's funny to see history repeat itself, not in the documentaries in the game, but it's funny to see RTS history repeating itself. Back when StarCraft 2, there were some folks that were like, I don't get it, what's the big deal, why are people so up in arms over multiple building selection? It's not that big a deal. And now, like, I find myself kind of taking that side in AOE4. I'm like, I don't understand these complaints. I don't come from that background of AOE 2. So for me, I just think AOE4 is a good game. And I don't really understand why people are complaining about it. And it's funny to have that other perspective now. with a different game. So I don't know. That's just interesting. I probably might have said one or two things that these guys are saying back when StarCraft 2 came out, but right now I hear them in Twitch channels just ranting and raving. And I don't think I ever ranted and raved, but they sound a little bit elitist, and some of their arguments actually make zero sense. It's just that they're arguing that they want things to be the same as they always have been. So another really funny thing that's in the same context is people are complaining about balance. Of course, even the game had been out for like 3 days and people were already crying Imba. And it's clear that none of them were Brood War fans for decades, because think about the progress of StarCraft, the StarCraft meta over the years, right? There have been 0 balance patches in StarCraft Brood War since 2001. 2001! When Boxer bunker rushed Yellow, he could do nothing about it. He's the best Zerg in the world, one of the top couple Zergs in the world. He couldn't do anything about it. But did people cry and like make Blizzard change it? No, they figured out a way to beat it. The meta changed and they figured out how to, deal with that situation. Savior was killing every single Protoss with macro, and people just couldn't figure it out, and it was just like impossible to beat him, right? But did they make Blizzard patch the game and nerf Zerg? No. Bisu just figured out a way to beat his style. And then people have since then figured out how to beat Bisu's build, right? And so, there's a lot of balance patches that happened between 1998 and 2001. Don't get me wrong. But I'm just a little worried about people whining too much, I guess. And if they listen too much to people whining, and they might overbalance it, and they might even have to balance things back later on as people figure out the game later. But I guess that's not a big deal. But it's just very interesting to see how quickly people claim that the game is broken. Whereas from the perspective of Brood War fans, we can look and see how the people that were involved in the game and the map makers and things like all kinds of different things factored in to changing the way the game was played and balancing it in different ways without the developers stepping in and actually physically changing the game in some way. So I don't know. We'll see how that goes over the months and years, though, how they balance things and if they're going to be able to keep it balanced. It's especially difficult because there's 8 civilizations, and they're probably going to add more, right? I think there's like 40 civilizations in AOE2 or something like that. That's how they make their money off expansions, is by adding civs, right? So there's probably going to be a ton later on. So it might be actually physically impossible to balance the game in some ways and still keep it interesting, and not be like AOE1, which I played a little bit of, which was basically like every civilization was exactly the same, except they all had one top tier unit that was different or something like that. So, that's kind of boring. It's more interesting to have the civilizations be significantly different, but it's hard to balance it then. Anyway, there's one other thing that I think is interesting that I wanted to talk about, and that is the fact that there is so much room for growth in this game in terms of the meta, in terms of the skill level of the players right now. And again, I'm reminded of when StarCraft 2 came out. The players who won the first StarCraft 2 tournaments were objectively not very good. Like, their skill level, their APM, they're just, they were players that were failed Brood War players a lot of the time, right? Players that just couldn't win a Brood War tournament ended up being the best StarCraft 2 players at the start. But people were still figuring out the game as well, and we have that same situation here right now. Looking at the competitive scene for Age of Empires, it feels very similar to that start of StarCraft 2. And I'm not trash talking here. The game is new, and lots of players are new to the game. And so, it makes sense that people are not going to be playing the game right now at the level they will eventually. But I can see, having, watched StarCraft evolve and having watched StarCraft 2 evolve over the years, I can see where there's so much room for Age of Empires 4 gameplay to evolve as well. There's a lot of room for skill improvement, even in the current best players. And, sometimes it's just natural that, the game is new, and so people don't have like things memorized yet how they want to play it yet. So the best players are mousing over the upgrades and making sure they have the right one and seeing what they do, because they don't have it figured out yet. So that's going to decrease their effective APM just by doing stuff like that. Things aren't automatic yet. But also, to be completely honest, some of the best players of Age of Empires 4 just don't have very high APM compared to what you'd expect from a Korean pro gamer. And so there may be a skill inflation as things go on that are going to force people to either get a higher APM in order to compete with Age of Empires 4, or, be kind of pushed by the wayside, like a lot of those early StarCraft 2 players were, who were successful in the first year and then just kind of fell off afterwards because they just didn't have the mechanics that could compete with when you had some of the better Brood War players switching over. So I don't know, that's something to look out for as well. And there's just, obviously a lot of cool opportunities for people to learn micro tricks that I could just kind of see the possibilities there. There's probably going to be all kinds of different kinds of builds that are going to be more focused. If you watch the top players on Twitch, a lot of them have builds where they're floating resources, they're queuing up units, and those are things that are like sacrilege to a top level Brood War player because they're technically inefficient, right? And so I think Age of Empires 4 players are going to focus their builds more. They're going to get exact numbers down, and they're going to realize that, like, okay, for this build, I need exactly 8 villagers on food and 20 on wood and 3 on gold. But then if they attack me and I need more of this, I'm going to put 4 on this. Like, that kind of precision is going to come to the game with the way people play in the future is what I'm kind of expecting. But right now, people are still figuring that stuff out. So I can just kind of see, though, that there's a lot of room for things to improve on. And also, there's little micro tricks that people are learning already. Like, I saw someone the other day build a ram next to their archers to block it, because the ram then creates a pathing problem, so they couldn't get their archers surrounded by horsemen that were attacking, right? And it's a clutch little thing. Or people are going to maybe even be popping archers in and out of rams to dodge shots, like you see people popping siege tanks in and out of dropships or something like that. So there's going to be a lot of cool micro tricks that people are going to figure out, and it's going to be really fun to watch people come up with cool stuff. The same way that we watch people come up with cool stuff in StarCraft 1 and StarCraft 2. So, I mean, it'll be interesting to see how that goes. And right now, there's not a lot of high-end Brood War players that I'm aware of that have switched to Age of Empires 4 as well. Like, we don't have a Flash or a Jaedong or someone switching over to Age of Empires 4 at this moment. So we may have to wait for some of those players to really step in and show what's possible as well. Right now, it seems like most of the Age of Empires 4 players are former Age of Empires 2 or 3 or Age of Mythology. I don't know, there's like a billion age games out there. So a lot of the players are from that scene, and a lot of them are from StarCraft 2 as well. But it's interesting because not all of them have switched over completely. There's still StarCraft 2 tournaments going on. There's still Age of Empires 2 tournaments going on. And so some of the players that are the top players in Age of Empires 4 aren't even playing it full time, because there's still some money and exposure in the other scenes that they are into, and so they're not really into it full time yet. But it is still interesting, though, that we do have people flocking from a lot of different games to Age of Empires 4, because it's the new game. Like when StarCraft 2 came out, you had Red Alert players, you had Warcraft 3 players, you had StarCraft players, all coming together into this new RTS that was brand new and shiny and had support for tournaments and stuff like that. And we're seeing a little bit of that in Age of Empires 4. But like I said, I haven't seen any of the Korean Brood War players switch over or try it yet. That I'm not really keeping track of everything, but I'll be curious to see if any of them do switch over and try it, if they might do well at it, or maybe they won't do well at it, because it is a different style of game. So anyway, so that's just some stuff that I've had on my mind, basically, and I just kind of wanted to ramble for a bit and put that stuff out there and just make some points. And if you guys enjoyed it, I hope you did. If not, then you probably tuned out a while ago and didn't actually listen to the end, so that's not that big of a deal anyways. But thanks for watching, thanks for listening, and let me know if you guys have any thoughts on this as well. Let me know if you have any thoughts on Age of Empires 4 content. Like I said, I am planning on doing some more casting, and I've got a couple guide videos planned as well, so I'm going to be putting those out too. Hope you guys all enjoy the other stuff coming out, because like I said, it is a pretty cool game. And all right, take care, everybody. Thanks for watching.